Chapter 4. The music screeched and died. A cry arose from the guests as the ballroom was plunged into darkness. There was the sound of breathing, the crinkle of petticoats, an uncertain stillness. Then there was a spark and a flicker. A ring of candlelight spiraled around one of the centermost chandeliers, and a hunting glow stretched across the domed ceiling, leaving the guests drenched in shadows below. Hanging from the lit chandelier was a vertical hoop that Catherine was sure hadn't been there before. Lounging inside the hoop, apparently as comfortable as if it had been a chaise lounge, was a joker. He wore close-fitting black trousers tucked into worn leather boots, a black tunic belted at his hips, and gloves, also black, not the white dress gloves the gentry wore. His skin glowed like amber in the firelight, and his eyes were rimmed in kohl so thick it became a mask. On first glance, Catherine thought he had long black hair too, until she realized that he was wearing a black hat that hung in 3 points, each tipped with a small silver bell. Though he held so still they didn't ring, and Catherine could not recall the tinkle of bells when the candles had gone out. How he had gotten up there. The stranger hung suspended for a long moment, dwelling in the stares of the guests below, as the hoop slowly spun. His gaze was piercing, and Catherine held her breath as it found her, and at once seemed to stall. His eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly as he took in her flamboyant red gown. Kath shivered and had the strangest urge to give him a nervous wave, an acknowledgement that yes, she was aware that her dress was unduly red. But by the time her hand had lifted, the joker's attention had skipped on. She dropped her hand and exhaled. Once the hoop had made a full circle, a ghost smile lifted the corners of the stranger's lips. He tilted his head. The bells jingled. There was an intake of breath from the watchful crowd. "Ladies, gentlemen," he spoke with precision, "Your most illustrious Majesty." The king bounced on his toes like a child waiting for the Christmas feast. The joker swung himself up in one fluid motion, so he was standing inside the hoop. It spun another lazy half-turn. They all listened, mesmerized by the hesitant creak of the rope that attached it to the chandelier. "Why is a raven like a writing desk?" The hoop stopped spinning. The joker's words blanketed the ballroom. The silence became resolute. With the stranger facing toward her again, Catherine caught a flicker of firelight in his eyes. Then, upon realizing that a riddle had been posed, the crowd began to rustle with murmurs. Hushed voices repeated the riddle. "Why is a raven like a writing desk?" No one proposed an answer. When it became clear that no one would, the joker stretched one hand out over the audience, closed tight in a fist. Those beneath him took a step back. "You see, they can each produce a few notes." He opened his fist and, not a few notes, but an entire blizzard of black and white papers burst from his palm like confetti. The crowd gasped, reeling back as the pieces swarmed and fluttered through the air, so thick it seemed the entire ceiling had disintegrated into paper notes. The more that came, the more the crowd cooed. Some of the men appended their hats to catch as many of the notes as they could. Laughing, Catherine lifted her face to the ceiling. It felt like being caught in a warm blizzard. She held her hands out to the sides and gave a twirl, delighting in how her red skirt ballooned out, kicking up a papery snowdrift. When she had gone 3 full circles, she paused and tugged the slip out of her hair, thin white parchment, no longer than her thumb, printed with a single red heart. The last confetti pieces looped down to the floor. Some spots in the ballroom were ankle deep. The joker was still peering down from his hoop. In the tumult, he he had removed his three-pointed hat, revealing that his hair was black after all, messy and curling around the tops of his ears. "Though admittedly," he said when the crowd had quieted, "the nose tend to be very flat." The bells on his hat tinkled, and up from the base of those three tiny points, an enormous black bird arose, crying as it soared toward the ceiling. The audience cried out in surprise. The ravens circled the room, wings so large their flapping stirred up the mounds of paper below. It took a second turn around the ballroom before settling itself in the chandelier above the Joker. The audience began to applaud. Catherine, dazzled, found her hands coming together almost without her knowing. The Joker tucked his hat back onto his head, then slipped down from the hoop, so he was hanging from a single gloved hand. Catherine's heart lurched. It was much too high to risk the fall. But as he let go, a red velvet scarf had become tied to the hoop. The Joker spun languidly toward the floor, revealing white and black scarves in turn, all knotted together and appearing seamlessly from his fingers until they had lowered him all the way to the ground, kicking up a swirl of paper notes. The moment his boots touched the floor, the circle of light from the chandelier spurred out through the ballroom, each tapper catching flame in fast succession until the room was once again ablaze. The crowd clapped. The Joker dipped into a bow. When he straightened, he was holding a second hat in his hands, an ivory beret with a decorative silver band. The Joker sent it twirling on the tip of a finger. "I beg your pardon, but does anyone seem to be missing a hat?" he asked, his voice cutting through the applause. A moment of uncertainty ensued, followed by an offended roar. Jack, halfway across the room, was patting his tangled hair with both hands. Everyone laughed, and Catherine remembered Marianne saying that Jack had intended to steal the Joker's hat as a means of initiation. "My sincerest apologies," said the Joker, smiling in a very unapologetic way. "I haven't the faintest idea how this hat came to be in my hands. Here, you may have it back." Jack stormed through the crowd, his face reddening fast as people chortled around him. But as he reached for the still spinning hat, the Joker pulled away and turned the hat upside down. "But wait, I think there might be something inside. A surprise? A present?" He shut one eye and peered into the hat. "Oh, a stowaway!" The Joker reached into the hat. His arm disappeared nearly to his shoulder, far deeper than the hat itself, and when he pulled back, he had two tall fuzzy white ears clasped in his fist. The crowd leaned in closer. "Oh, my ears and whiskers," the Joker muttered. "How cliché! If I'd have known it was a rabbit, I would have just let him in there. But as it can't be helped now," the ears, when he pulled them out, were attached to none other than the master of ceremonies, the White Rabbit himself. He emerged sputtering and peering round-eyed at the crowd, as if he couldn't fathom how he had gotten into a beret in the middle of the ball. Catherine pressed her hands over her mouth, stifling an unladylike snort. "Why, I never," the rabbit stammered, flopping his big feet as the Joker settled him onto the floor. He swiped his ears out of the Joker's grip, straightened the tunic, and sniffed. "The nerve! I will be speaking to His Majesty about the blatant show of disrespect." The Joker bowed. "So very sorry, Mr. Rabbit. No disrespect was meant at all. Allow me to make amends with a heartfelt gift. Surely there must be something else in here." As Jack made another swipe for his hat, the Joker nonchalantly pulled it out of his reach and jingled the hat beside her ear. "Oh yes, that will do." Reaching in again, he emerged this time with a very fine pocket watch, chain and all. With a flourish, he pressed the watch to Mr. Rabbit. Here you are. And see there, it's already set to the proper time. Mr. Rabbit sniffed, but when the glitter of a diamond set into the watch's face caught his eye, he snatched it out of the Joker's hand. Well, I'll consider. We shall see. But this is a fine watch. He gnawed on the watch's hook with his large front teeth, and evidently determining that it was real gold, slipped it into his pocket. He cast another unhappy glare at the Joker before scrambling off into the crowd. And for you, Sir Jack be nimble, Jack be quick, the Joker offered the hat to Jack, who grabbed it away and slammed it onto his head. The Joker started and raised a finger. You may wish to... Jack's eyes bugged, and he whipped the hat off again. A lit tappard candle was sitting in a silver candlestick on top of his head. The flame had already burned a smoldering hole in the top of the bread. Hey, I'm trying to get some sleep, cried the candle. I beg your pardon. The Joker reached forward and pinched the flame with the fingertips of his leather gloves. A curl of smoke wrapped around Jack's head as the corner of his good eye began to twitch. That's peculiar. I thought for sure you'd be jumping over the candlestick, but this is all upside downward indeed. The guests were in fits, many laughing so hard they didn't hear the echoing caw of the raven as it dropped off the chandelier and swept toward them. Catherine took a startled step back as the raven brushed past her ear and settled onto the Joker's shoulder. The Joker did not flinch, even as the raven's talons dug into his tunic. With one last bit of wisdom, we must bid you a good night. Reaching up, the Joker tipped his own hat to the crowd. Always check your hats before donning them. You never know what might be lurking inside. The bells jingled as he pivoted on his heels, making sure to face everyone in the audience. Catherine straightened as he turned her way, and winked at her. She couldn't be sure if she'd imagined it. His mouth lifted quick to one side, and then, before her very eyes, his entire body melted into inky blackness. In the space of a heartbeat, the Joker had transformed into a winged shadow, a second raven. The two birds fluttered toward the window and were gone.